Okay, so suppose you have a Git repository and you want to access it in multiple places, or you want to make sure that other people can access it. In order to do that, you need to cooperate with a server on the internet. So what does that mean? Let's assume that you already have a Git repository that you're interested in. So in this case, it's my Lisp learning directory, but it doesn't really matter what it is. So the way that you do remote work in Git is you have what's called a Git server, which is essentially just another computer that stores the repository you have here, and then anyone who wants to work on it can push to that server, or they can pull from it. And all that means is that you change the state of the repository that's on the server. So in order to do that, you have to have someone who'll host it for you. So it's possible to do that yourself. You can have a computer that you own that's just on the public internet that has Git repositories in it, and you can push and pull from them. Some people do that, it's a good idea, but most people want something easy, so they use a host service. Lots of people use GitHub, but I use GitLab. There are lots available. So in order to be able to push to or from, pull from GitLab, I need to create a project. Instructions for other platforms are probably extremely similar. So what does the project look like? I'm going to call it Lisp because that's the name of the local folder, so that makes sense. I'm going to make it private because I'm going to delete it like 5 minutes after this video. And I don't want to initialize it with anything because I've already got a project that I want to push, so there's no point in having them make files for me. So just create a project. I should just get a totally blank thing. So then they have a bunch of instructions. These are handy. The instructions I'm interested in are probably push an existing folder. But we've already done some of these things. So Git init we did in the previous video. The add, commit, and push. Add and commit we saw in the previous video too. So actually, all we really need to do is add a remote. So what does adding a remote mean? Adding a remote just means telling it what the remote server is. In this case, the URL for the remote server is git at blah 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 my server. So let's type that in. Git remote add origin. Blah. So then what the hell does that tell me? Well, you can see it by doing, I think it's git remote, git remote v. That'll tell you where the Git server is. Normally you only need one. You only need multiple if you're like working with lots of different people and they work on different platforms. It doesn't actually really make very much sense to have more than one remote, but you might have one. So anyway, that's the name of the server. So now if I look the folder, everything's still clean, but now I want to push. So what's pushing? Pushing is just sending the version of my branch to a remote version of the same branch. So I'll just do push. Sorry, git push u origin. Origin is the name. I think origin is the default name. It's the name people usually use. You could have multiple with different names, but there's no point. So if you just say push, so origin is just the identifier for my GitLab server, the local identifier. It's just easier than typing out git at gitlab.com, blah, blah, blah. And then I have to say which branch I want to push. I want to push master because that's the branch I'm working on. Then you get some information. I could try and now that I've specified. So this U stands for upstream. So it just says which branch is my local master. Which branch does that correspond to on the remote? And you can see that here where it says branch master setup track origin master. So in future, all you need to do is git push, and it'll know automatically. I think in this case it won't do anything because it says it already knows everything's there. But I'll do an example where I've made some changes, and you'll see that you just have to do a push. So if I refresh this page now, it's actually got all my files. They're all written in Common Lisp. You can see the same directory structure that you saw locally. They've all been edited really recently because I think I deleted them or something. Can't remember what I did. Anyway, so the rest of the steps depend on what your platform does. So I mean, GitLab has tons of stuff that you can do. GitHub also has tons of stuff you can do. But I'm not interested in doing any of it. Instead, I want to say, imagine I was on another computer and I wanted to access these files. I'm going to pretend to be on another computer by just making another empty directory. So now I'm in that other empty directory. You can see there's nothing there. No files at all. This is a nice clean state to start from if you want to copy your things from somewhere else. So what do? There are instructions, or there were instructions. The relevant operation is called cloning. And clone. There are two different protocols for cloning. Hopefully, it doesn't matter which one I use. That's the URL. If I do git clone, I was an idiot, so it's actually cloned it into another directory called list because that's the default behavior. I'm just going to remove that because it's not what I wanted. Instead, I wanted it to clone into the current folder, and to do that, I have to pass a dot, which says cloning into the current directory. So now if I look around, I've got all the files back. I've even got the history, so I can see it in the log. Now things start to get complicated because I've got two different versions and they can change independently. So how do I keep all of those things in sync? In general, the problem is complicated, but I'll just show you an example of like you're only using one computer at a time, so you don't have to worry about like you've got a team of people that are all using them independently. So maybe I'll just make a change. I'll just remove a file. Just remove the tutorial because it doesn't matter. So what do? I add tutorial and commit that I removed tutorial because it sucks. And then I can see the status. So now it says, what does it say? It says your branch is ahead of origin master by 1 commit because I've made 1 commit since I last pulled. And I can use git push to publish my local commits. So let's do that. In fact, actually, I'll just show you one thing first. Just the difference between master and origin master. If I do git log master, that's the same as doing git log because I'm on the master branch. It shows me my 3 commits. If I do git log origin master, it only shows me 2, and that's because that's what the remote has. So Git keeps track of what your local branch versus what they call the upstream branch, the branch on the remote, keeps track of the 2. It doesn't do this by keeping them literally in sync. You don't have an active internet connection to the remote version. It just keeps a local copy, and you overwrite that local copy whenever you push. So as I said before, I know what my upstream branch is, so I don't have to do the -u thing. I just do git push, and it knows to push to the right branch. If I refresh GitLab now, that file should be gone. Yeah, it's disappeared. And however, if I imagine you close down your computer, you go back to the other one. I can't type. So now I'm back where I was. File's still there. Tutorial, still got stuff in it. Nobody knows anything has happened. I'm still at the old situation. If I do git status, it says nothing's wrong, so I might get confused. So stuff's happening on the remote. The way you get information from the remote is by doing a git fetch. Fetch is a command that says go to the remote server and find out what's changed. So if I do git fetch, it should hopefully tell me what's different. It says now my branch is behind origin master by 1 commit and can be fast forwarded. Fast forwarding means the changes, depends. Well, actually, I can maybe show you how it can be complicated. Imagine that I make some local changes to tutorial. Maybe I say this is a really cool file. And maybe I say I have changed tutorial. Clearly now Git has to do something smart to figure out what the correct change is. If I do git status, it'll tell me I've got 1 change locally and 1 change remotely, and it can try and figure out what the right change is, but it can never be sure that it's right because the two changes I made were incompatible. On one branch I deleted the file, and on one branch I added a line to it. Doing both of them might mean just removing the file. It might mean removing the file and then adding a line. It might mean undoing the change that I did on the other computer and just using the version that I have here locally. So in general, this is a hard problem. The way to fix it, at least in this case, is to just not do that. Don't make independent changes. You can fix it, but you have to think harder. So in this case, I'm just going to assume that I want to take the changes from the remote. So I'm going to say my local changes, forget about them, I'm getting rid of them. And the way I do that is I do git reset hard origin master. So now you can see in the log, I got rid of my old commit. I've got the commit from the other machine. It says remove tutorial, and the file should be gone. That's the basic idea. So push, fetch, pull are the commands you need to know to do remote stuff. And the basic idea is never do incompatible changes. If you do, tell me and I'll write how to figure out the differences, but it's simpler if you don't.